Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for TheChessWorld.com. Welcome to another course. This time I want to focus this course on middle game tactics, decision making. I want to analyze games where we've got loads to learn in terms of making the right decision. So for the intro, I chose a game played by Cooper against former world champion, legend, Mikhail Tal. So without further ado, let's dive in. We'll see this game from Black's point of view. So the game goes e4, Black plays Sicilian, knight to f3, Black plays d6. Here White goes for the open Sicilian, so knight takes d4, knight f6, White plays knight to c3, and here Black plays the well-known, one of the most popular Sicilians, the Najdorf. So after a6, of course here White has several lines to consider in the opening. In this game, which was played long time ago in 1959, still the move White played in this game, still this move is the main move. Nowadays, bishop g5, this happens to be one of the most aggressive systems White can play against the Najdorf. So here Black plays with e6. I know we're not focusing too much in openings. That being said, I'll mention the main concepts, because in order to understand any game, or any middle game for that matter, we need to also understand the opening we're playing. So e6 is a key move to Black's strategy in the Najdorf Sicilian, in most Sicilians as well, because we want to control the d5 square. So here, by playing e6, we also make sure that if he ever takes, we can also take, we can take with the pawn, but worst case, queen takes f6, we make sure our pawn's structure is protected, it is healthy. We don't want to play with double pawns unless we've got a reason to do so. So e6 makes a lot of sense. White plays f4, and here is where Black plays a line that nowadays is considered to be dubious. That being said, in practice it's not easy to play against. What Black does is b5. Now, opening aside, moves aside, our intuition, or I would say opening fundamentals, tell us to just get our pieces out first. And here, playing b5, if we follow these concepts, we would know that b5 is probably wrong, because we are not getting our pieces out, especially as Black. In the opening, we have to prioritize development over aggressive moves. When you're playing Black, king's safety is much more relevant. As White, since he's got the first mover advantage, maybe he can get away with some things. As Black, though, we have to be careful. So here, bishop e7 is a solid approach for Black. Knight b7, queen c7. There's also queen b6. Queen b6 is the well-known poisoned pawn line, where White usually sacrifices the b2 pawn, and there are endless theoretical lines to study there. So I want to come back to the game now. The concept I just said, it goes for any line, any opening. Usually development is much more relevant. And here, what Black's doing is, he's been over-aggressive when most of his pieces are still on the first line, on the first rank. So it's supposed to be dubious. Now, after b5, White played queen f3 in this game, and that might be a slight inaccuracy by White, because e5 is calling Black's bluff. After all, e5 feels like White's winning a piece. Black's idea after e5 is to take, and after f takes e5, we play queen c7. So now we get rid of the pin, white takes, then we play queen e5 check, and we do get the piece back. Problem is, after we get the piece back, we just moved our queen around like 3 times. We'll have to move it a 4th time or maybe a 5th. And in the meantime, white is getting all of his pieces out. So here, for instance, if I'm white, I wouldn't bother taking that pawn on g7 because that would actually give black the piece play he needs to activate his position. So here, as a no-brainer for white, I would just castle. I castle, I make sure I keep on getting my pieces out. Development is all that matters, and here white knows that sooner or later his development advantage should be relevant. Maybe it's bishop f3, maybe it's knight e4, maybe it's sacrificing on b5. This is all likely to work for a simple reason. Most of his pieces are out, whilst black still has the king on e8. So imagine how delicate black's position is. But the best move, according to the engines here, is rook to a7. So not an easy position to play for black at all. So I would say this is the first inaccuracy from white to play queen f3 here. Of course, queen f3, you could argue that he's threatening to play e5, but here it gives us a one-time opportunity to play bishop b7 risk-free. In fact, after bishop b7, we are attacking his queen as well. Now, queen f3 is on bishop b7's radar, and it's like we got b5 and bishop b7 for free. White had to punish us playing e5 when he could have played it. So after bishop b7, here white plays bishop to d3, and black goes bishop e7. So for now, we don't really have to worry about e5 because, of course, white's queen is hanging. So here, after white playing bishop d3 and we play bishop e7, we can tell he's not showing his cards yet. Is he going to castle kingside? Is he going to castle queenside? Well, our strategy as black depends on what he does. And I think now it's time for white to show his cards. In this game, white goes for a queenside castle, which is probably what white should do against Sicilian. White usually castles queenside, and then he goes for a kingside pawn storm. So if he castles kingside, for starters, there are some tactical patterns here. After queen b6, he's likely to lose a piece, because queen f2, or queen e3 for that matter, runs into knight g4, and then we take the knight on d4. So he cannot even castle kingside. So even if he could, I think it's not the right approach, because if he castles on that side of the board, then it'll be difficult for him to attack on the kingside later on. So let's see a sample line here. Alright, so yeah, if he castles kingside, well, we just mentioned queen b6, and that wins material for black. With that aside, let's say I'll play knight d7, he goes rook to d1, still queen b6 wins a piece, by the way. I'll castle. So here, white, by castling kingside, he's not achieving much, because even if he plays a useful move like king h1, it's not going to be easy for him to fire a pawn storm, because for starters we got a powerful bishop on b7. The main reason for not firing a pawn storm as white is because his king is there. So it would be wise for white to play the same position with his king on b1. If his king was on b1, then he's got all the right reasons to play g4, h4, and to even start sacrificing material on the king side. But when his king is on h1, he cannot afford doing so. It's just too risky. So in this position after bishop b7, we see white castling queenside, and here Tal played queen b6. Now queen b6, we're not really attacking that knight on d4, because if we take, then he plays bishop takes b5 check, and our queen on d4 will be lost. So I think here, and of course Tal, being such a strong player, probably had a lot of reasons to play queen b6. Now, my humble opinion, I think knight bd7 is more flexible, and this is a decision from black, because here in this position we would think, alright, we've got to castle, or else we have to play knight d7, maybe queen c7, we have to do something as black. So here's that decision. If we castle right now, in a way, we are taking on a lot of risk, because he'll go for a kingside attack soon. I mean, his king is already on the other side. So after a move like queen h3, now e5 happens to be a threat, a big threat, so his bishop takes f6 and e5. And honestly here, I don't want to play something like g6, I don't want to play h6. Each pawn move I play on the king side, I'm just creating weaknesses for him to attack. Therefore, we kind of sense that castling kingside here is too risky. So, okay, there's no need to castle yet. What else can we do? Well, we can be flexible, and being flexible usually pays off. In chess, it does pay off. So knight bd7, my reasoning is I play a useful move, I'll play a move that I'm likely to play anyway, and I'm not committing my king to the kingside yet. I know I'm likely to castle kingside if I ever castle, because castling queenside, I mean, with all this action going on here, it's risky. Might be possible, but it's risky. So what I'll do is I'll play a move that I'll play anyways, because knight bd7, it is clear that we want to play that move. We got e5 under control. We might have knight c5 attacking his attacker, which is bishop d3. Also, if we get knight c5, we might have b4 as a threat, and then white's pawn e4 is in trouble. So I think knight bd7 is just more flexible. A possible line is, I mean, he can still try queen h3, but now he's not really attacking much on the king side. That's one of the benefits of keeping our king on e8. Now if he plays king b1, just to name a natural move, then I can play rook c8. See, by not playing an early queen b6, now I might play queen a5 in one go. I can also consider sacrificing on c3, which is a standard sacrifice in the Sicilian, because we essentially destroy his queen side, and then we get a lot of positional compensation. On top of this positional compensation, we can also tell that we are essentially getting a crushing attack on the queen side. So here I imagine queen a5, on top of all the threats we got on d3 and e4, we can also try knight to a4. So this is exactly what we're looking for when we play the Najdorf. Now, that's the reason why I believe queen b6, while it's not a mistake, since we're not really attacking black's knight on d4, sorry, white's knight on d4, since we're not really attacking it, I think it was better to play development move. So white plays rook to e1. Okay, now black goes knight bd7. Fair enough, we're not going to fall for the queen takes d4 trap. And by the way, here after knight bd7, we could say that queen takes d4 is a threat, because now white doesn't have checks. Alright, so here is where speaking of making decisions, I think this is where white went wrong in this game. White played knight c2. Now, you're probably wondering, why is knight c2 a mistake? Why it's not losing material? It doesn't have a worse looking position. Well, the mistake is he's been passive. And when you've got a position like this one with almost every single piece on board, when your opponent still got the king in the center, when you're playing white and you're supposed to have the initiative, then playing something passive like knight c2, it's not the right approach. Here, I'm not saying it's easy for white. In fact, if you check with the engine, you'll realize that knight c2 is the first move. Again, I think that's too passive. So maybe white should try something else. Since we play against, we play humans all the time, we don't play against engines, the human factor plays a big role. So if I was white here, I would strongly consider trying to generate some action on the e-file, especially because his king's still there. Now, I would love to play e5. My queen is hanging, unfortunately, so I have to do something else. Now, f5 is a move I would consider. Here, however, my knight on d4 is under attack, so I cannot do it. So, I mean, what else? What else can I play here? If it's not just moving my knight back. Moves like bishop e2 and bishop f1 are out of the picture because we're not going to play them. Just too passive. So, what about sacrificing material? Well, that could work because we would put black to the test. Now, how to sacrifice material here in order to generate some action on the e-file? Well, sacrificing on b5 looks too slow. In fact, it feels like we're helping black open up the queenside here, so this is like shooting ourselves in the foot, so we're not going to do that. Now, what about something like knight d5? Well, knight d5, it's an interesting try, because if he takes with a minor piece, it's not actually winning material, and it helps us open up the e-file, which is exactly what we want. If he takes with a pawn, then all of a sudden, our rook on e1 is going to be part in the attack, not to mention we've got moves like knight f5. Now, you could argue that the engine here says this is probably better for black, or even equal. Okay, could be equal, could be 0.00, but our opponent as black is going to panic here, and he's not going to play like an engine. We know here, having the initiative is more relevant than material. Here, our knight on f5 is attacking the bishop on e7, we're hitting the g7 pawn. He cannot castle because bishop e7 is hanging. If he plays bishop f8, which is one of the engine moves, by the way, we play e5, and we know that he's likely to crack here. He's not going to defend well. That's what I like about these lines for white. If we are going to sacrifice a piece, we're going to do so in a way that our opponent, the minute he makes a mistake, the game's over. So that's the advantage we have here as white. Now, if you want to know about specific variations, after pawn takes, we can keep on sacrificing here. Bishop takes. Now we've got rook takes, e4, and again, we can try these lines because black still has got the king in the center. So our intuition should tell us to just go for the kill. Why? Because his king is in the center. When the king is in the center, anything can happen. So here, for instance, black has only move not to lose on the spot. That is knight takes e4, queen takes, and now black gets away with it, castling kingside. That being said, here after queen takes e7, still equal according to the engines. If you ask me, I would play white because we've got all sorts of threats. I like our bishop on g5. I know we're down this change, but we're gonna get a pawn for it, and black's rooks are still passive. So these are the positions I like. Here, the concept we mentioned before still applies. The minute black makes just one mistake, it's game over. Here, if I was black, I'll be completely honest here, I would think I'm worse. I don't have queen e3 check, I don't really see a way to trade queens off. I know, if we look at this from black's point of view, we can tell there are even sacrifices. Knight takes g7, bishop h6. Even if I knew knight c5 is the engine's move, this is not an easy move to play, because now my kingside is just lacking pieces. So, in a game, without knowing what the engine says, I would just think I'm losing here as black. What about bishop h6 and queen f6? Isn't that a checkmate? I have to play queen a7 not to lose on the spot. What about knight takes g7? That might work. So we're always facing difficult decisions. Here black apparently gets away with it, playing rook a7. But again, this is easier when you're analyzing this with an engine. In practice, we can tell white has, I would say, 80% of success. 80% chance of success. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is it pays off to go for active lines within reason, of course, and knight c2 was probably the first real mistake white played in this game. So, we'll finish part 1 of this game here. I think for an intro we mentioned a lot of concepts to digest so far, and of course we'll continue analyzing this game because there's much more to this that we have to analyze, so we'll do so in the next chapter. Hope you found this useful, hope you've learned something, and of course I want to see you guys on the next one. Thank you.